Well, hey, you found my channel. I-995 ImpalaSS is noted right there. Oh, hey. I wonder why it's called that. Because we have ourselves a 1995 Chevrolet ImpalaSS. Probably the best ImpalaSS, in my opinion. I've had this car now for going on 12-ish years. Not my first one. Not my second one. Not my third one. Not my fourth one. I've had many. But today, we're going to go over and talk about the powerhouse in this. That's right. This engine in this Impala, just like any of the 94 to 96 ImpalaSS's, come equipped with stock LT-1 350 5.7 liter small block Chevy. And if you're looking it up, 8th digit and the VIN code is going to be P. Or you can look right here where it says 5.7 liter. They also came in the Caprice, Roadmaster, and Fleetwood, affectionately known as the D-body. Generation is a Gen 2 LT-1. And Gen 2 was developed first, 1991. Debuted for the 1992 Chevrolet Corvette. 93 got put into the Firebird F-body, Camaro, those things. 94 we saw it into here, shoved in there. Made it all the way to 97. You guessed it, it was replaced by the LS1. So, let's talk a little bit about that LT1 and this whole shebang-a-bang, shall we? As I mentioned, this engine was first introduced in a 92 Corvette, and GM was redesigning the engine at the time. They needed an upgrade for their small block Chevy that they had going on there, and they went back and were like, you know what? 70s we had that LT1. Let's come back with it. Pretty much significant improvement here over the Generation 1. You know, the Gen 2 has got the reverse cooling system, which talked about many times. We got the OptiSpark in it versus a distributor. You got a whole bunch of other little odds and ends that make this thing, you know, more unique. With that Opti, you get the Spark Advanced technology going on because it's controlled by a computer underneath that breather box. And yeah, there's a couple of interchangeable parts that you had from Gen 1, Gen 2, LT1. Crankshaft, pistons, connecting rod, flywheel, flex plate. Those things are, you know, just all common. You can interchange them, surprisingly. When it came out, it was in the Y body, the F body, B body, and the D body. The Corvettes and Camaros, they had aluminum heads on them. All were cast iron block. But the LT1 that's in the Camaro and Corvette Firebird basically has a 4-bolt main. And in the B bodies, D bodies, they are all 2-bolt mains. So they're a little bit stronger. And that is because GM doesn't ever want to have a car that is much better, gooder than the Corvette. Because Corvette, of course, is their flagship that beat the pants off of everything and anything and always was top of the line sports car. So why would you have another car in your lineup that has a better engine in it than the original one? So they technically downgraded it. Even though John Moss did have come out with some retro designs, he put a 502 in the original Impala when it debuted at the LA Auto Show in 92. And he also had a retro design upgrading the Impala with some high suspension parts, you know, robbed from the Caprice 9C1. and a 6-speed T56 transmission with that cross member that goes all the way back to the rear end, just like in the Firebird and Camaro, to give it, a 6-speed. Because who wouldn't want an ImpalaSS with a 6-speed? I mean, he was living the dream. A couple other hopped up performance parts that he put onto the LT-1 and that 94, but sadly never made it to production, which I guess make one. So those horsepower gains in the Camaro, Firebird, Corvette was about 300 horsepower in their LT1. Firebird was about 275, and then of course the Impala was about 260. So there's not much change, but that's going to get into later part of this video with doing upgrades. So stay tuned for that. Now, when they went through 97, when this thing was about to go to the end, they actually did a revamp on it, and they called it the LT-4. And the LT-4 was a specific, high performance engine. It came with a 1.6 to 1 aluminum rockers, which just had 1.5 to 1. You had higher lift, so you had higher compression in it, and then it made about 330 horsepower and 340 torque. And I think they were going to end up putting it into like some of the special project Camaros and Corvettes, and I believe that the 97 Impala, yes, they had the Impala slated for 97, was going to receive some of these special options, but GM nixed it there at the last minute. So the LT-4 never made it to production into an Impala, but it did make it into production into the Corvette, the C4, and then you had the SBL Camaro SS and the Firehawks that had that LT-4 in it. So now let's talk about some of the balls, things on an LT-1. Well, biggest, most baddest thing that people always complain about with these is that OptiSpark. The OptiSpark back in there, it's where your sparkulator plug, your doodads go off, and it's got like a cam plate thing in it that spins around, and there's a fiber optic light that shoots through it, and that's when your sparks go sparking onto your engine. Everyone always complains about it because what happens is they typically get wet, or they're installed incorrectly, or they crack from being brittle from heating up and cooling down from the engine, and they get water inside of them, and then your arc doesn't know where to go, so it causes issues. Early OptiSparks, they didn't have the vacuum vent tube on them. 95, they actually put it on there, and you can see that little tube right underneath here goes through this harness and goes whoop right into the intake elbow here. That is the vacuum for your OptiSpark, and it gets rid of all that BS, baloney, spark, retardation, clickety-clackety gases that are inside the OptiSpark to help it decay sooner and give you failure points. So make sure you have this, or you upgrade to this if you can on your LT-1 if you're considering staying with an LT-1. That's problem number one that people run into with these things. Second problem that I've noticed with these is you get exhaust issues. The exhaust manifold bolts tend to break, and the manifolds will just warp, and then you get exhaust leaks. So it seems to be kind of a running occurrence with a lot of GM products and inferior bolts maybe into the heads, but it's actually a pretty simple removal technique. You just weld on a nut and you can back it off and get it off. Get some headers and you'll take care of it, or get some stock exhaust manifolds, or take your old manifolds and go get them. See if you had a machine shop that can flatten them down, kind of like turning a rotor, make sure they plane it smooth, and be able to reuse them again. Third thing I would say would probably be this water pump, and it kind of relates into problem number one. These water pumps, they are cam driven, so they got a little sprocket puncher bushing on the back side of here, goes to the cam. The cam spinning actually turns the water pump itself. Those are notorious for leaking, and what happens when you start leaking the glycol, your coolant, down, look what's right underneath it. It's your OptiSpark. And what I say about the Optis being wet, well, coolant, water, wet, moist, it doesn't, that's problem number 3 is these water pumps. So the next thing I would say, my personal opinion from experience, minus this one's actually done pretty well. They don't hold power very well. Longevity, they're just not, it's not there. I've blown up about 4 of them. Okay? 4. It's not fun. So, my personal opinion, they don't, minus this one, they don't have, you know, longevity wise, they're not really good. So you got that to deal with. But where do you go with an LT-1? Well, let's kind of get into it. So if we go through and identify our problems that we mentioned earlier, we started with the OptiSpark. Now you can replace this OptiSpark or do the vent on it. They have an LS style coil pack setup that'll go to the top of your coils here, or on your valve covers there. And the coil packs will go to each individual spark plug, just like on the LS, which looks something like that. And that kit runs on its own setup and control box and everything else. And I looked at it, it's like 1,800 bucks. That's a lot of money. So there is that. Electric water pump. Let's talk about that. Now you can upgrade to an electric water pump anywhere between 100 bucks to like 300 bucks depending. And it's not very hard. I think they can go on the cover there. You can replace the whole housing, put the cap on the back for that bushing for the drive off the cam, remove it, and then just some simple wiring to wire it up so you got water circulating through. So let's just say in the medium range, we'll go 225 on a water pump. So now I'm going through adding all these up. So you're 1,800 bucks on the OptiSpark delete, and then an electric water pump upgrade. You're looking at $2,000 right now. Okay, $2,000. That's a lot. It's a lot of money to put into a stock engine so far. Remember, stock. We haven't done anything to this hypothetical LT-1 that we're building in this car. So problem 3 with the exhaust manifolds, you can get yourself a set of headers. The problem being now with these is I bought those. Those are hooker headers. They're ceramic coated. I bought those back in 2012 off of Street Trends when they were still popular. And they got the smog air pump delete stuff going on there. And yeah, I think those are like 400 bucks. You can't find them anymore from Hooker. Street Trends doesn't exist. You might be able to find some used ones, whatnot, but those are about 400 bucks for the ceramic coated ones. They're very tight. They're very specific for this car. And there's a lot of modification, especially on the passenger side. You got to get in here, move your air conditioner lines, bend those all out of the way. Make sure your heater core lines, those are all the way, because there's a lot more heat that seems to be produced off of headers, which understandably, but there's a lot going on here. And then getting to the back EGR valve that plugs into the very back of the intake through here, that's not fun. Been there, it's not fun. So doing the exhaust, it's plausible, but it's very expensive, and if you're doing it yourself, it can be frustrating, and be prepared to make some specialty tools so you can snug up your header bolts, because you're gonna have to. So those headers will bolt up to stock catalytic converters and then the stock exhaust, but if you're going that far, you might as well just do full exhaust setup at that point. So now you're looking at another 800 bucks. That one is investable because it's kind of universal. No matter what kind of motor you end up having in here, you pretty much get away with using that exhaust setup. But let's just throw another 800 bucks on it. Top of the $400, so there's $1,200. On top of the $2,000 for our other stuff here, we're at $3,200 just to start a stock engine and make it have an exhaust and not have problems as mentioned in the beginning of this video. Okay, well, now you're breathing out the rear. You might as well suck in some air, because, you know, engines are air pumps, and kind of start going into this. The ugly home plate thing that comes up here. Here's a picture from my 9C1. Delete on that. Kept the elbow. Got a plug. Got that from Street Trends too, along with my fuel rail covers. Got the K&N setup going on here. Now this K&N setup will work with the stock home plate looking thing. It just deletes first base, and all this stuff comes with it. So that right there, that's probably, I think I paid 300 bucks for it back in 2012. So another $300, so we're at $3,500 just for that. Those, you can get the Corvette fuel rail covers. You can make your own plug. You can do all sorts of stuff here and go a little cheaper, but I'm not going to talk about dress stuff right now. You can make an elbow, you can make a intake with sewer pipe, and you can get one of these cone filters. You could probably build that for 50 bucks, to be honest. So let's just say we'll back it down. We're at $32.50 for cold air intake, exhaust on a stock engine, plus eliminating problematic known issues. So on a good day, you're dumping $3,000, $3,500 into an intake and exhaust, and to get the car to run, to make it reliable enough so you can go cruise in it and just drive. If you want to end it there, cool. If not, keep going. I did. Am I regretting it now? Meh, a little bit. But had the PCM tuned. PCM for less. I got the Impala geeks know, Brian Herter. He tuned it. I'm sure he put a bass tune in it, whatever. I told him what I wanted it to have done, and he did it. Transmission shifts a little firmer. Did rear end. I got 383 gears in the rear end. Detroit locker, because my 308 Posi was blown out. But that's where I've ended it at, because I started realizing that I'm dumping a ton of money into this car, and guess what? I'm still probably in the high 14s if I run this thing in the quarter mile. High 14s. Kind of respectable, but you got a 4,200 pound car, right? Well, 14's really not very good compared to today's standards. What are your options from here? Well, you can get a nitrous kit, do a 50 shot, 100 shot, 150 shot. I probably wouldn't go more than that. You can get one of those wet, dry setups, plumb it all in. And then you're going to start creeping down. So now you're in the mid 14 range with nitrous. You start deteriorating your engine very quickly using nitrous. Just saying, on a stock LT-1. Other options you got, you could put a Pro Charger on this thing. Not really worth it. That in itself is like $4,200. Or yank it out, have it built, get a 383 stroker, put that in. Now your Pro Charger, you might get you down into the 12s, high 12s if you're lucky. Stroker, you're looking low 12s, you know. But again, 12s, these days, it's not really all that fast compared to what it could be. You know what I'm saying? You got 70s Chevelles, and they have a bunch of goodies bolted onto a naturally aspirated small block Chevy, and they're already rocketed into the 12s as it was. I get it. The car's not much more lighter, but it's lighter than this beast. It's also coupe versus sedan, whatever. But, and you compare apples to apples, it's a small block 350 to a small block 350. This one's just fuel injected. You know, the Chevelle I'm talking about, it's carbureted. Maybe it's fuel injected. I don't know. But what I'm saying is, in the grand scheme of things, you're running what people in the 70s and late 80s should have been running with those numbers. Nowadays, 12s isn't really where it's at. It's more in the 11s, 10s, 9s, even 8s. And that's just with an LS turboed. Now, you throw an LS turbo in it, are you going to run 8s? Probably not. You're going to have to do a whole bunch more modifications to the car, obviously. But I guess where I'm going with all of this is, if you think about it, we were already at, let's just go with the stroker setup. You might be at $6-10 grand just into pulling the LT-1 out, making a 383 stroker, building it, forged rods, you know, roller rockers, all that fun stuff. Cam, make it so it's the stock motor that's in here. Then you got to do tuning, and for 10 grand, you can buy a hell of an LS setup. So, end of the day, where do you want to be with your car? Do you want to have that Impala Cruise look? You want to have a stock, bone stock car? You want it to sound cool. Intake. Yeah. I chose to do the bare minimum Impala Geek bolt-on stuff, have a nice sounding exhaust, throttle it. Sounds like it's got something, but really, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't. Gets me from point A to point B. It's reliable. I've driven this car all over the country, and I plan to keep continuing to drive it all over the country. But I still have the stock LT-1 in it. It's all stock internal, stock bottom. What are my plans? Well, as of right now, everyone's doing LS swaps on everything. I know, I said it. I'm one of them. But do I really want to have an LS in this car? Not if everyone else is doing it. It's kind of cool and all, but, and I just mentioned about having, you know, a junkyard engine and rocketing. Yeah. That'll be my plan B, is LS swapping. My plan A, once this LT-1 goes, I'm going to go Gen 3 LT-1. That way I can pay tribute to an LT-1 in my car. The horsepower ratings of those new LT-1s are just insane. Insane. I'm pretty sure that those ZL1s and those Camaros are pushing like 540 horsepower naturally aspirated. So that's what I'm going to end up going in with this. Of course, going to be the transmission's going to be different and a whole bunch of modifications, but that's down the pipeline. For whatever reason, if I can't figure out the finances and do all that stuff, of course, I will probably LS swap, because that's, you know, you're looking at probably 18, 20 grand for Gen 3 versus an LS swap. As I mentioned, maybe 4 grand and this thing would fly, but I don't know. Trying to be different, spend a little extra money. Payoff is what it is. So just some tips and tricks on what I have with a Gen 2, what some kind of bolt-on options you got for it, what some cheat codes are, I guess, if you will. If you're keeping stock, some options to think about. You know, there's all sorts of stuff. I mean, hell, go crazy. Put a 2JZ thing in the thing and make it sound like a little Toyota Turbo Supra. Do something different. I don't know. I'm not going to do that, but just some options. But that's going to do it for this one. A little history on the LT-1. Bolt-on upgrades, what you could do simply at home, kind of cost comparisons, analysis, and stuff from there. So hope you like this video. Please like, subscribe, share, comment below. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks, everyone.